Yeah, welcome everybody to our talk, Evolving Microservices When Production Hits Developers. My name is Alex Heusingfeld. I'm Head of Architecture at Vorwerk Digital. Yeah.
Good morning from my side as well. So I'm Stefan. I work for Vorwerk since about 3 years now, and before then I was an external consultant to them. Why that might be interesting, you'll see later on. And so we want to speak about today about our Thermomix ecosystem, our digital ecosystem. Who of you knows Thermomix in the audience? Have you ever heard of it? Okay, so not everybody at least. So who owns one? So we don't make a sales pitch today, for sure. We have a booth downstairs so that you can also get familiar with what the device is about. But today we want to speak about the ecosystem behind our kitchen device.
Yeah. Additionally, we want to explain our journey, how we came from a monolithic application over microservices towards self-contained systems, and the why behind these changes.
So of course we hit some obstacles down the journey, and we want to share that with you also, and want to make transparent why we changed our system that we built in the first step.
Yeah. We learned a lot over the last couple of years, and that was mainly because others shared their experiences with us and also shared their mistakes. And that's what we want to do today, to share our mistakes with you so that you don't have to repeat ours. And of course, we're also here because we're so eager to talk about the platform that we've built and the product, and we really want to infect you so that you're eager to join us.
So to understand where we are coming from in our digital journey, we have to speak a little bit about Vorwerk and what is Vorwerk about, and about why Logitech pointers don't work. And so Vorwerk is a traditional German, very old company, 136 years of history. I'm not sure who joined the talk this morning from Rewe. And so we have a little bit of similar history and also similar difficulties transforming such an organization into the digitalization area. And at the same time, Vorwerk is family owned, and that gave a lot of opportunities to us as well, because the family is really interested in building long-term relationships to our customers. And so we are not focused on fast money, but rather on long-standing relations and long-standing products which bring benefit to the customer.
Yeah, let's talk about a little bit about the digital world that we entered.
So the appliance, the Thermomix, it's a kitchen appliance, a cooking device, and that exists since 1971. And so we focused a lot on our hardware, because there we are very strong traditionally. We build great hardware products. And the haptic of the product changed over the years and over the course of time. And only in 2014 we made the first step into digitalization, when our Thermomix TM5, so I think we better switch between our pointers, when the Thermomix TM5 approached to the market and brought a digital cooking experience into your kitchen. So basically what it does is it shows you a recipe step by step, a digital recipe that you can follow in a guided way, and it improves your cooking. We connected this machine to the internet in 2016 and made it so an IoT device. And that's why we are standing here at such a conference, because now we really made the switch, the digital transformation from a hardware manufacturer, and out of a sudden we were one of the largest manufacturers of IoT devices. Only last month we introduced our newest model, TM6, and there we continued the digitization of the product. And as you see, the haptic, the outer appearance of the device didn't change so much. Innerly it changed, of course, also from the hardware perspective, but the most change happens really now in software in this product.
Yeah, and that is, in my point of view, basically seen also by the large screen. So before that, our customers were used to having knobs and wheels and buttons, and now we have a display and can, so to say, control via software the interaction with the customer.
So our Thermomix comes with a digital ecosystem, and that answers one of the most questions
most questioned questions.
Google questions in the internet, actually, and that is, what do I cook today? And I think you all can relate to this because that's our everyday task. So what do I cook today? And for that, we built the Thermomix digital ecosystem. And you can think of it like a streaming music subscription, but just for recipes. You get inspired what to cook today, what you want to have on your plate, and you can organize your recipes and say, now I want to plan something for my birthday, so let's make a list for birthday recipes, and you go along. And we also feature that you can plan your week and say, Monday, it's time for tomato soup. On Tuesday, there's the next dish, and accompanied by a shopping list that you can also buy the ingredients that you need.
Yeah.
And this digital platform and these core elements are there from the very beginning, and they didn't even change so much during the last 5-6 years. But the journey really started differently. We want to speak about how to come from a monolith and go to microservices or even self-contained system. And back then, I think nobody really was aware that we were building a monolith, but also the requirements back then, 2012 and 2013, were much different when we started. Because the main focus was, let's build an iOS app which has an app which comes along with the device, right? So it was a little bit like when I saw the Revo talks this morning. Yes, that happens everywhere, right? So back then, let's build an iOS app. And back then we said, okay, we have about 350 recipes which are worth to be digitized, and these have to be promoted somehow. And let's launch in Europe with our 6 biggest countries, and they will get the iOS app. And then, well, somehow we also want to make money, so we want to sell recipes as collections. And for that, we will build a backend system. Back then, we chose Hybris, which did also commerce stuff, and was responsible for dealing with the in-app purchases, for example. And so what we ended up with was...
Yeah, the architecture diagram, if you can call it this, was basically one monolithic backend application which contained everything. And due to the success of the product, unfortunately, I have to say, it grew and grew and grew, as successful systems do. And in front of it was the iOS app consuming the APIs. So there was no web, there was only the iOS app and the Hybris system offering a REST API for it.
Yeah, so some greetings here from Mr. Conway, because basically it was pretty much how the whole organization was set up back then. There was the internal demand, a very small team at Vorwerk, which had the idea of digitizing the product. And then there was some external consultancy, and they said, well, let's build an iOS app. So next step was then, okay, we need the backend. Let's build somewhat with another team the backend. And then as next team, there was a very secret division in the very secret team, because the TM5 was developed in whole secrecy, which builds the software and the whole ecosystem around, or at least the whole software package for the hardware device. And it was really a totally disconnected team back then. And only later we introduced also a web application, which also became a very monolithic structure. And then somehow we said, okay, and now there's an ops team, an external ops team, which now has to operate this whole stack. And so that's what you heard many times at this conference, that this structure basically leads to your monolith. And we had very few internal people. A lot of development was done by several suppliers, which were all not internal people. And we had also this single point of contact to the consultants. And it was a real top-down communication, and so we ended up in all the patterns that you experience here or discuss here. And also, the supplier teams reflected our architectural layers pretty well. And so it was really a multi-layer architecture with high dependency between the different layers.
Yeah, that's like the opposite of an end-to-end deliverable delivery able team, right? Like all the teams had to contact the external agency, and no one really thought for themselves, but they were all contacting the agency when they had to talk to each other. That's maybe not a recipe for success.
So basically that leads to you build it, but someone else runs it. Then you're typically ending up with, well, perhaps you click and I just talk, right?
Yeah.
Otherwise, I think I leave that Logitech pointer behind. So basically, you end up in situations like it works on my machine, right? And so I don't care about, or at least it cannot be my software because somehow somebody messed up in the ops team. And so this is a typical behavior, and you can have the best suppliers, the best teams, the most committed teams, but in the end, you fall back to these habits if you're under stress. And we had that sometimes, luckily not so often, but sometimes, and then you fall back into these habits.
Yeah. It turned out to be a real issue when our demand grew. Because back then, as Stefan just said, Cookidoo, so the platform was only available in Europe. But somewhere over 2014, the demand grew to other regions and especially to a very large community in Australia with about 300 to 500,000 customers. And someone who already built a global application will tell you, well, the latency between a data center in Switzerland and the Australian customer is not especially great. So add up to 700 milliseconds to each of your requests in good times. I'm not talking about packet drops here. So that actually got us into rethinking how we build the system, and everyone who already operated an SAP hybrid system and worked with it will probably tell you that it's not especially suited to be run globally. So we got into microservices, and that turned out to be the architecture in 2016. So we had that edge layer that was run on AWS with the green part that is with the green part that shows you, so to say, the general access proxying application that would also do caching. Then it still communicated to our SAP hybrid system in Switzerland, but we had a lot of microservices running in the cloud. And if you listened to Stefan before, in 2016, we also introduced our cookie, so the Wi-Fi dongle that actually connected the TM5. So we had to make sure that the TM5 was able to get all the recipes that you managed in your favorites and in your custom lists. So we had to build up a whole new system that this not so powerful piece of hardware back then was able to deal with. And that is, so to say, the violet part. But what you can tell is that this really had some advantages. So we said, okay, we need to be able to maintain our customer data. So for reasons of for legal reasons, so to say, the customer data had to be located where our company is located in Switzerland. We wanted to make sure that for auditing reasons, also the payment data is located there. And then again, we needed to make sure that our intellectual property, so the control, the steering information of the TM5, is also in a secure enclave, so to say, and that is also in our Switzerland data center. But as you can see from the many arrows going across the different services, we had a lot of communication between these microservices that turned out, to be an obstacle, which we will hear later on.
But nevertheless, that's the architecture which ran basically until March this year, and it really helped us and also supported our business case there. So because right now we have roughly 5 million users on the platform worldwide, and we have a platform of 2.3 million connected IoT devices, and that also around the globe. And I said beforehand, we started to build an application for 350 recipes roundabout, and now we are ended up with 47,000 curated recipes, which are done by Vorwerk, with this guided cooking inside, with also a success guarantee.
Success guarantee doesn't mean that everyone likes it, but
so and of course you can mess it up as well, right? Yeah. That's also always true. I mean, that's very similar to building a microservice infrastructure and having a guided cooking recipe. And so we are available in 17 markets also around the globe. And we also have the ability, if you give us your consent, that we see what you cook, to make also suggestions on what you can cook later. And so right now we are recording roughly about 800,000 cooking sessions each day from our customers, and also process this with big data and getting analysis there. If you want to hear insights on that, there's also a colleague here, Bene, who will happily answer questions downstairs at the booth also.
Yeah.
And
one thing maybe to mention on that is we were talking about customer satisfaction and long-term customer relationship. Something where we see that customers do value this core principle of ours is in the percentage of customers that accept in us tracking their cooking behavior. And as far as I know, that's slightly above 80% of our customers that gave us the consent to track their cooking behavior on the TM5. So that's really a word of trust put into our hands.
So and with these figures, it's also gets obvious that if you have an error which happens once in a million, we run into that quite often also. That's also an obstacle that you have to face if you develop for the platform. And some fun facts with the cooking that we are doing in Germany alone, we have an estimation of 1,650 tons of broccoli, which are cooked with our devices each year. And so that's also some happy insights that we get from this kind of data there. So in the end, this architecture that Alex showed beforehand, you build it, you run it, and we made the teams responsible for the microservices, but still there was that central ops team sitting in between.
Yeah, and then you hear sayings like, if there is an issue, it has to be the infrastructure. No, it's definitely the upstream service. Whatever it is, it's someone else's fault, right? So there were some major shortcomings in Cookidoo 1.0 that we today want to talk about. So as I said, that you don't make the same mistakes. So first of all, as you have seen on the architecture diagram, there was a very high technical complexity. So what you might not have grasped is the different types of technology that we were using, different types of, so to say, communication protocols that we were using, because the microservice teams had a lot of freedom back then, and there was not too much architectural guidance. So we saw request cascades of up to 3 services talking to each other, or sometimes even 4. That, of course, everyone who can do some maths, if a service has 99.9% availability, if you have a request cascade of 4, it's always lower than 99.9%. So the error potential increased, and it was also very tedious to do troubleshooting on these services because of the missing tracing. Apart from that, we totally underestimated the organizational dependencies that we brought in with these microservices. And that is, so to say, reflected in the time to market also.
Yeah, so the time to market was really much longer than desired. You saw that we had different layers in our architecture. We had a monolithic single-page application in front, and the backend systems which provided the APIs, whenever we wanted to introduce a new feature, it took more or less, felt at least like ages to get a new feature up and running in the system. Because we had to rely on so many different teams down the stream, and we had a lot of coordination effort, which also put a lot of organizational effort in our company. So, and we did not scale well enough. So technically, we scaled well. So technically, we had no issues because the systems were there and scaling well from a technical perspective. But organizational and also feature delivery-wise, we were stuck.
Yeah, and then again, same as our backend, the single-page application that we had in front of our backend also grew very monolithic and was hard to change. And almost every time we introduced a new feature, we broke existing ones. So introducing new features was really like the most painful thing that we did. So it was pretty clear that our innovations, or our strive for innovations, demanded a change in the way we work. And that was where we derived the learnings from Cookidoo 1.0, where we said, how do we actually want to go forward with this? So first of all, I have to say, if you want faster product delivery, faster feature delivery, focus on mean time to repair. Usually, mean time to repair is a term that you hear in talks about people who are talking about operational aspects. Like mean time to repair is the new mean time between failure. But actually, this has business value, guys. So if you are able to fix a bug within a minute, you're probably also able to roll out a new feature within a minute, or to change a feature toggle within a minute. So that really does not only have technical value, but you can sell it to your business because it helps them.
So speaking of business, we really had to reassess our business services. So, and also focus on our business demands. And we figured out that in our company organization, the stakeholders also had not a unique look at our ecosystem, but their own fields. So we had to design our system around it. So first we had this monolith and basically one demand chain, and everything floated in there, and it was also the bottleneck for demand coming in. And so the verticalization of our teams and our business verticals that we have in our platform helped. Like the team responsible for recommending recipes is a different team than the one who's responsible for the commercial part of our ecosystem, for example.
Yeah, one thing that I cannot stress enough, as I said, you have seen the architecture diagram before. Don't introduce technical complexity if the business doesn't demand it. So yes, there might be this wonderful, shiny, technical new product that you really want to use, but first of all, have a problem to solve, and then decide on the technology, please. Yes, I know, it's hard, and I can tell you, you will probably find a problem. Yes, if you search hard enough. The question is it really the right solution for that problem? This technical complexity really kills you over time. And that's also like the same with automation. So what we learned also the hardware is, yes, automation is a good thing, but seriously, no one of us, who would vote for 100% unit test coverage? Yes, exactly. And I hope the same hands go up if you vote for 100% automation. There are things that should not be automated because they occur only very seldomly. Don't automate everything. Switch on your brain and ask yourself, is it a tedious task? Is it error-prone? Do I have to do it very often? Then probably automate it, but not everything.
So when we started to build our platform, we really much relied on building most of the stuff ourselves. So also thinking back, and I have to remind myself constantly that back then in 2012 or even 2011 when we started the project, there was basically no AWS IoT solution, for example. And back then there was no whatever. And so we built a lot of stuff ourselves. And so we switched and also use more platform as a service solutions and software as a service solutions now. For example, our search we now do via Algolia, and for everything which is editorial content we are now using and utilizing Contentful. And for monitoring purposes, we now introduced Instana recently for our new setup, and that also helped us to focus on our business features much more and to leave the hard work of what products can bring, like search, really to the experts and buy that as an additional service. And here the time to market is of much more value to us than having the latest little, what is it called? Little nitty, what is it? Nitty, whatsoever, detail.
Nitty-gritty detail.
Nitty-gritty detail, that was it. You don't have to have this, and you don't have to be over-sophisticated in thinking that you are so unique that you need your own search with very particular search results, for example.
Exactly. I mean, that's basically the point, right? Is your search so different to another one's search? Ask yourself, do you have a competitive advantage by building your own search engine? I would say probably not if you're not a competitor to Google. If you're a competitor to Google, good luck, but think about it just for a second. Is it competitive advantage? Is it right to invest my time, which is the most precious thing that I have to invest? Is it the right thing to invest here? Do I have competitive advantage?
So with all these learnings that we gained, and still we can't emphasize that enough, that brought us really where we are, but still we said there's time for change. And that's why we switched into functional domains and self-contained systems. Who knows self-contained systems or has heard about self-contained systems? So we might use some words about it that looked different a few years ago, right? And so we changed our organization, first of all, to also reflect then the new approach in thinking in domains. That started with having a real demand team. That was not so certain for us beforehand, and said we have one team consisting of different departments generating the demand for the platform. And we started very, very early on to also think about cross-functional, non-functional requirements like security, privacy, because this is really crucial for us and our customer trust. And we also invested in API design upfront, and then said we don't only have a demand team for the overall platform, but also business owners who have a business interest in their particular case, for example, recipe recommendation or the purchasing of our subscriptions. And now we have fully enabled self-contained teams, which are taking care of one domain. For example, about the search domain, with a dedicated product owner for their team. And the whole team typically consists of then a domain architect, a test manager, who is embedded into the team. And we also have a loose connection or representatives joining the teams for our touch points like the device itself, the TM6 device, and iOS app and Android app. So they're also part of the team and have a close relationship to the team.
Yeah. The most important thing, I think, is that this team is really end-to-end responsible for their delivery. So they are mostly autonomous, and that is what we focused on, because we wanted to have the focus on mean time to repair, that the teams are able to deliver as fast as possible. And that's where we also put our focus on in terms of enablement. So we set up architectural concepts and organizational structures, as well as operational services that the teams can use in order to be faster with delivery. Like we now have a central GitLab repository where the team, so to say, can invite new members by themselves. So they can provision their own GitLab runners just for their services, depending on what kind of thing they need. So there is a lot of freedom given towards our teams, but they have to take the responsibility, because that's what it's about when we talk about you build it, you run it.
So organizational change in the company was really huge. One main obstacle was that there was not enough people, there were not enough people to also fit these roles that we now are made up. And so one recommendation that we can give and where we live good with is, regardless of any discussion about if the methodology is right or if you can have something like a proxy PO, a proxy product owner, yes, you can, and it really helped us well, because we were not able to fit all these roles internally. Because also there, you have to have domain knowledge, and even if you could hire somebody from the street, he will still lack the domain knowledge, which might reside in a team that you work with for a long time already.
I think the most important part about the proxy POs is that we enable them to take certain decisions by themselves. If you have a proxy PO that constantly needs to talk back to the actual product owner, that doesn't help you much, right? You need to enable the team to take their own decisions, because that's how decisions are taken fast.
And also one learning is that the product owner really has to have a deep technical knowledge also about what the platform can deliver, about what kind of complexity do you introduce. If you now ask for a feature which we have to roll out worldwide in all the edge regions, and that really helps if your product owner also has a key understanding of what would it mean to introduce real-time, I don't know, recipe counting in all the platforms around the globe, and you want to have it precisely visible in Germany what the people in Australia cooked, for example. You can do that, of course. There's a solution for everything, but the question is about business value and complexity there.
Yeah. Additionally, we had a very strong architects team, I have to say, which Stefan started back in 2016, and I took over last year. Basically staffed by externals from InnoQ, for example. but also by internal colleagues whom you can also meet downstairs. And we gave a lot of additional effort into cross-functional, so setting up cross-functional requirements that the teams could hold up to if they didn't know how to move forward. So especially in terms of the front-end integration, which we'll talk about later on a little bit, that was new to most of the people, and without the cross-cutting concept, this wouldn't have worked out, I would say.
So we had one challenge, and this is a rough overview of our self-contained systems that we have in the system or in the platform. There were new components, so we introduced a new search, for example, but there was a lot of stuff which was there and serving our 2.3 million customers. And so it was not a greenfield approach, because we basically had to also integrate the existing landscape and our existing customer base. And that was one of the bigger challenges moving forward.
Yeah. One of the detailed learnings that I would like to share are detailed, actually. So usually we say integrate early, integrate often is a very good pattern, or very well-known pattern across the technical community. So it turned out that it depends on the context, right? It actually always depends on the context. So for us, we had the goal to integrate that wonderful new search self-contained system that we built with our existing Cookidoo 1.0 platform, which, as we said, was still iOS app and the monolithic single-page application. And it turned out that it didn't work at all. So while our existing organization around Cookidoo was, we call it an oiled machinery, so they knew what they were doing and were working like a steam train, they were slow and they were not really able to adopt. And actually, we have to say we completely overwhelmed them because we didn't tell them that there was actually something new and a new way of working coming. So that's really the learning that we had. If you want to integrate early, make sure that people know what is coming towards them. So share what you're doing, what your goal is beforehand. I always say put a flag into the ground so that people know where the flag is, even though they might not run into that direction. They still know that you are working towards that flag.
So basically, now we were at the point you build, you run it. For the SAS team, that was totally fine. They were entitled, but still there was this legacy thing, right? And so basically, you could hear some things like, well, it works on my cloud, and that was the integration that was really hard then to say. Now the legacy part was the ones that it had to integrate. And actually, I read this, or I heard this in the last talk when I joined the microXchg 2 years ago, that really have to rethink about legacy, because legacy is the heritage that you carry on. And really like that quote, because nobody likes that old stuff, but this is still what is in production. That is what all your customers are using out there. And secondly, that is the system that paved our way for success. So we wouldn't have been able to reach that 2.3 million devices connected if we wouldn't have had this platform. And so there is value to it, and it's also constant learning, also for all the new teams which are starting new, and are wondering why didn't they use AWS IoT from the beginning? Well, it was not there, right? So, and this is something that we have to also explain for every new team member who's joining. Because in the end, the heritage will stay much longer than you actually want and than you actually planned for.
Yeah, our approach was actually to let the people who learned with us over all these years share their learnings with us, so that we wouldn't make the same mistakes of our past again in the new things that we built. So we actually asked these teams to contribute and develop with us together the new world.
So we had some other learnings. So don't invent too much time into corner cases. So for example, it's nice that there are 1 million different synonyms for pasta in Italy, but perhaps let's not focus too much on this one when you're building your search engine, for example.
Yeah. Also, resist to do too many changes at the same time. As I said, we were introducing OpenShift, which is a new way of operating things, which brings a lot of new challenges, as we just learned a few weeks ago. We established a new organization, which Stefan told you. We completely changed the way of working in terms of that we had autonomous teams who could, so to say, deploy whenever they wanted. And all that really overwhelmed the internal people and the existing organization.
So what really paid off well is that we invested very early on in our cross-cutting concepts, like API guidelines and authorization concepts and stuff like that. We did it very, very early.
Yeah, and what we can really say is be as pragmatic as you can be. So we had some ideological discussions whether self-contained systems were actually allowed to make synchronous calls to other SCSs, and we said yes. If the business demand is there, for example, if I want to have current information about an ownership that is not easily cacheable, like how fast should this cache be, really make that synchronous call. But think about resilience. So if the ownership service is not there to provide you an answer, what is your response? Do you allow access to that resource or will you deny it? That's a business decision. So unfortunately, I have to say we didn't have more time for technical details, so that's probably the most technical that we get. Unfortunately, really, like we could go on like talking for
so
whatever.
You can visit us downstairs for sure for more questions.
Yeah. So what I can say compared to what Rewe presented this morning, our self-contained systems consist of three different modules, so to say. One is our auth proxy, which basically handles OpenID Connect. So it completely abstracts away that layer from the application logic. And it handles the OAuth 2 flows and things like this. Second, we have an Nginx in there that does server-side includes, because our SCSs are responsible for their HTML front ends. So a self-contained system delivers the web application that its domain is about. So if we are talking about the weekly planner, it will also deliver the information about the recipe. It will not make any additional calls. It must have this information. And we include this by building heavily on front-end integration in terms of whether we put, so to say, common components into a pattern library, that is build-time integration, whether we do that in server-side includes in the Nginx, or whether we do it via client-side integration for optional content. Our TM6 now directly accesses the self-contained systems. So that's a very huge difference to the TM5's way of working, which only had one communication point. And we do this via mutual TLS authentication via our MTLS proxy. And then again, we have some SCSs, which are actually not SCSs, but rather facades, because they are calling our SAP Hybris in the background. So, for example, the profile. Yeah, as I said, there are way more technical details about this that we would like to share, but yeah, we really want to leave some room for questions. So let's go for the vision that we have, because as I already said, now we have the TM5, which is connected to the platform, which has a display. Now we have the TM6 that really connects to the platform, because what you can see here is that it actually like opens web applications. So the web applications that our SCSs serve are visible on the TM6 now. And that really brings a huge variety of new features that we can easily introduce to our customers, but also a huge responsibility of not messing up their user experience. So, what can we say after the go live beginning of March? It's damn good that we invested the time into a chaos day. So, whom of you knows about chaos engineering already? Okay, you should invest more time into that. So, what we actually did is to insist that we have a chaos day, meaning we simulate incidents in the platform to test our incident management in the teams, because we said the teams are autonomous and they need to handle the incidents by themselves. Again, we want to check whether the monitoring works. The teams are autonomous, so they need to be able to so to say, recognize issues by themselves. By doing that, we noticed that the network monitoring is still very immature. In terms of, we had an issue with one of the network appliances, and we didn't really recognize that it is an issue with the network appliance. By that, I have to say, we noticed that there is not much in terms of network monitoring on the market. So if someone has a recommendation, we now build that ourselves. That's actually not what I say is our competitive advantage, but whatever, we had to do it. And so to say, the most important learning that I had after the go live is definitely, if you want to enable the team and you want to focus on mean time to repair, optimize the analyzability of your system.
So, and of course, there's also room for us to improve in the future, for sure. And so we have some open topics. So one challenge is always how to weigh operational requirements versus business demand. That's a constant struggle that we have. And we are improving on that steadily, but we also have to. And one major question is, in how far do we allow the development teams also deploy to production? As Alex just mentioned, to production means somebody is cooking in the kitchen, just opening the TM5 or starting the TM6 in that case and trying to search a recipe. And oops, there's some new deployment in production and my cooking station has to still be vetted, right? And has to still run. And so that's really critical as we have one product which not only consists of the hardware, but of the software which is running on it. So, and one other question is, of course, how can we also transform some core components, or we want to transform some core components into our internal development teams. So we are pretty much doing everything right now with external suppliers. And as we have crucial core components, we also want to in-house step by step the ones which are crucial for our business.
Yeah. And one thing that we still have, so to say, have to do is how to turn skeptics into mentors. So in the meantime, we noticed that our operations people are really struggling with their new role, because they have the knowledge how to monitor things, how to know whether things are broken. But the teams don't, and they are so fearful that the system will fail every minute, and in the end they will be blamed because it's their platform, that they started to run moaning and finger pointing, and what we're now doing is basically turning them into teachers. And I have to say that works better than I guess anyone expected. So this motto, stop complaining, start teaching, really works out. We, in the meantime, have operations people who like to be in this firefighter role and really support our teams. And that is basically this. We coined the term, you build it, you own it. That is where we want to go. And we want to answer the question, how can I, as an external developer, own your service? How can I be responsible? And that is something that I have to say is truly remarkable for me, with all the partners that we were working on, whether it's, I don't know, Stormforger for the automated load testing in our pipelines, whether it's with externals from Nginx, or whether it's with our partners from Mindcurve, Communicode, Intif, InnoQ. I have never seen such a high degree of commitment in any project. So the people truly believe in what we do, and that is what I can share here. You cannot sell true engagement. True engagement is something that you feel. And I have to say that's really what we feel in this project, that people are engaged to deliver the greatest value that they can towards us and our customers. And that's really something that we are thankful for. And that's the end of this talk. Thanks. Yeah. Do you have questions? Yeah.
Does it work? Okay, thank you. Actually, thank you for a great talk. I actually have two quick questions. First, you were referring to the product returning integrated HTML. Does it mean you implement micro frontends?
Well, the question is what you understand as micro frontends. We have...
It's a pattern, so it's like microservice returning actually.
So
which is integrated on the client, coming from various services.
Yeah, so we don't have dedicated front-end services, no. Okay. That's like some of the teams split their self-contained systems into multiple microservices.
I see.
So, for example, a different service that's handling batch jobs from a service that is responding for the mobile application and for the device. But we don't have dedicated services that are only serving a front end and talking to a back-end service.
Okay, so maybe clarify. My question was actually if you integrate front ends coming from various services on the client level. So like that.
We might be able to do that, but actually we don't want to.
Okay, I get it. And the second question is, I think, pretty easy. Okay, how was developers' reaction? Were they willing to take responsibility? I mean, to own more?
So that's the challenging part, actually, because you have to, unfortunately, differentiate between the development teams and the suppliers whom the teams are working for. And that's also still a challenge, how to enable that to have the highly motivated development teams, and somehow you have to fit that into commercials. That is not solved, but we are on the way to solve that. To also, if you want to have availability 24/7, you also have to put that into a commercial contract and have to enable your teams to also cover that span when you are globally available. Yeah.
Okay, get it. Thank you.
Hello, and thanks for a great talk. I have a question regarding this single content system and the multiple front-end you showed before. For example, you have a web application, right, which shows you a list of things to cook, and you have also this TM6 model, which shows you a list to cook. But the front end seems to be different, and I think like the tooling and the technology used for both of them are different. So is this one team who is responsible for like both front ends, or how it works?
Yes. So in that particular case, we really have web front ends for these features on the device. And so it's basically responsive design that they're using. And in some corner cases, we also have different endpoints to deliver a different view on the same SCS, on the same application.
It's actually based on content negotiation. So it's most often the same endpoint, but you deliver different HTML. Because on the device and on the mobile app, which is also hybrid, you have to have a different link, how do you say?
Schema.
Yeah, schema that is opened on the native app then.
So maybe this is part of the answer for my question. So yeah, also talking about those shared front ends and putting everything together at the latest point. So when you have now a requirement regarding UX, this sounds to me like you have to either touch server-side includes or a library or whatever. So you had a bunch of different technologies, which all at the end bring your front end together. So is there a steering board and you discuss UX, or how do you manage that in an agile way?
This discussion we have, yeah. So of course all over the place. And there are some use cases that you can imagine where it's more or less on hand. If you look at the recipe detailed page and have recommendations, which should be personalized, it makes sense to make a client-side include, for example, and make that call then to the service to provide the snippet for the personalized recommendation. In other cases, it's also obvious that we have more a server-side include because of cacheability. Our footer is a typical server-side include, highly cached, for example. And then there is, yes, detailed discussion about a lot of opinions also, and that's also fair, and that's what we embrace also. And I think that's what also makes the work valuable for the development teams, because we do listen and do not have an answer for everything beforehand.
Yeah.
Good.
Okay. If there are no more questions, as I said, we're still downstairs, and yeah, we brought a TM6 with us. We brought a huge TV because we're eager to show you what we built there and get your questions. So, bug us. No.
Unfortunately not. Good.
Yeah, so the next steps at the moment, the focus for me is, so I took over the responsibility for our production system, and the very next step is definitely, so to say, automated assessment of releases. I really want to achieve that goal that we have like at least 80% of the releases that can go directly to our production. Yes, exactly. So we have, as I said, GitLab CI deployment pipelines. We have automated checks in there, and we want to raise the quality of these checks to achieve a ready for production label, and then enable the developers to automatically deploy without any approval. Development teams.
Good.
And we only verify them.
Good. So thanks.
Thanks a lot.